Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon, Empower Your Financial Data, Power BI and Vision and Vantagepoint. Your presenters today are Jennifer and Tom from our Data Solutions team. And I'd just like to go over a few housekeeping items before I pass it off to Jennifer and Tom. You can customize what you're seeing on your screen today by going to the GoToWebinar screen viewer. You can maximize the presentation or you can maximize the webcams, whichever you prefer. And when it comes to audio options, you have two options here: computer audio that streams over internet and phone call. We do find that the phone call option is a little bit more reliable than internet, just depending where you are and how many people join us this afternoon. So just keep that in mind if you're having audio issues, that you can toggle between the two. We do not monitor the chat box during the presentation, so if you have anything that you'd like to convey to us as a Team SN here represented this afternoon, just submit them to the questions panel, and that's also where you're going to put your questions. There is a handout available for download in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel. It is in PDF, so go ahead and download that if you'd like to follow along with Jennifer and Tom this afternoon. There will be 3 polling questions throughout the presentation, as we are offering CPE credit this afternoon. So just make sure that you are casting your votes if you're looking for that CPE credit, and it also gives Jennifer and Tom a good reading on the crowd and some input on that. And the survey will pop up after the presentation has been concluded, so make sure that you're sticking around for that. That is the only place that we know that you need that CPE credit from. So let us know how we did, give us some suggestions for next time, ask any questions that did not get answered, and also indicate if you need that CPE credit. So without further ado, Jennifer, Tom, it's all yours.
All right, thank you so much, Kaylee. It was nice to have that opening. All right. Let's go ahead and get over to our next slide. So a little bit of an introduction of ourselves. My name is Jennifer Gustafson. I'm the consulting manager for the Vision and Vantagepoint team. I have been using the Deltek Vision and Vantagepoint system, predominantly Vision, for the last 14 years. I've been working with clients and implementing their software, dealing with how to leverage their system and how to get those key metrics that are needed into a easily digestible and consumable component. I'm a 26-year plus accountant, so I really am looking at those financial pieces and understanding what it's like to have a day in the life. Tom, how about an introduction for you?
Yep. Thanks, Jen. My name's Tom Hyde. I'm a principal IT consultant at Standby Ness. Prior to joining here, I worked a little over 20 plus years in the business intelligence and data analytics space, mostly developing data warehouses for Fortune 500 companies for marketing purposes, and worked closely with a lot of data science teams and used a lot of reporting tools, including Power BI. So glad to be here.
All right, thank you so much, Tom. So we're going to go over our agenda today and the items that we're going to be covering. So our next step is going to be to meet the SN Data Solutions team. Then we're going to discuss accessing your metrics and how to do it quickly. From there, we're going to jump into client success stories. So not only hearing it from us, but others who have used some of the tools that Tom has helped put together. And then we're going to end with connecting your data to the Power BI tool. And finally, questions and answers from the organization. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's meet our team. So we are headed up by our COO, Jason Jaworski. You have myself as the Vision Vantagepoint Consulting Manager, and James McGee is our Data Solutions Consulting Manager. And then we have our team. So Tom is one of our principal technical consultants. We have Thomas Gibbs, a senior technical consultant, Eric Smith, a senior technical consultant, Sparsha Mupati as a technical consultant, and Raymond Bryant, another technical consultant. It is this team that really helps put together that information so that you are able to not only leverage Power BI, but any of our custom tools or items to help access your financial data quickly. All right, so we're going to talk here about the AE metrics, really looking at Essen's recommended top 9 metrics. And then from there, we're going to jump into Power BI and looking at the consolidated financial dashboard. So preparing for this webinar, we partnered with our AE advisory team, and we partnered with Kate Allen. Kate comes to Essen with some unique backgrounds. Not only is she an MBA, but she's a registered PE. And she owned her own engineering firm. So she's already put together a business model that has helped identify the benchmarking and the tools needed to put together all of these types of metrics. In addition, many organizations have their own. And what we found is that if we follow this metric, selling the work, doing the work, performing the work, and the overall goal is to have profitability. If we follow this path, it helps us with where we're going. One of the things that we highlighted here in doing the work is some basic metrics: net revenue per FTE, labor utilization rates, achieved direct labor multiplier, net payroll multiplier. These are some common ones that I have seen throughout my 26-year life as an accountant that many organizations have used. From here, referencing the Stand-on-S top 9, we've actually come up with 9 metrics that every organization in the AE space should be using. These metrics look at your net revenue per FTE, your utilization, those billing multipliers, your net payroll multiplier, how quickly are you turning that WIP, that work in progress, into invoices, which then leads into how quickly is that accounts receivable, are those client invoices getting turned over as well. Let's not forget those FAR clients and dealing with overhead rates, dealing with government contracts and how we manage those, and where are we trending. With these metrics, we're able to quickly see where your firm represents, and then also where you compare, both with your peers, firms comparable of your size, and then overall in various industries. These metrics are based on PSMJ standards. We've also been able to pull in the Deltek Clarity Report and other various items for our benchmarking. So Kaylee, we're going to turn it over for our first polling question.
No problem, Jennifer. So here is the first of 3 polls that we're going to ask you to complete this afternoon. So the first question is, are you using the Stand-on-S AE Financial Benchmarks Top 9? Your 3 answers are absolutely, plus we have our own, some, but not all of them, and benchmarks. All right, the poll is launched, and so I'll keep this open for about 60 seconds, or if 85% of the crowd participates, then I will go ahead and close down. And this is just a reminder that if you're looking for that CPE this afternoon after this webinar, to make sure that you're answering and participating in these polls so we can gauge your interaction. We have about 77% voted, just waiting on a few more people to get their clicks in. All right, just need a few more people to participate and then we can move on. Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and close and share the results so everybody can see. And 24% say absolutely, plus they have their own. 56% say some, but not all of them. And 20% say benchmarks.
All right. So, the good news is for that 20%, you're in a great company. There's many people who understand that trying to get those benchmarks is really difficult and really hard. And how do you do it? I mean, right now, pulling data out of Vision, you're pulling 5 different reports just to get some of these. Some of that is your unbilled earnings. Some of it is your income statement, your project earnings or office earnings, your accounts receivable. So with that, Tom's going to show us how we can take all of that data and very quickly see it in a high level view. So with Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Don't want that. Oh, there we go. Okay. Hopefully you can see the screen.
Yep.
In fact, I'm gonna go full screen. There we go. Still see it okay? Okay. So what we have here is a financial dashboard. So very high level, focusing in on a lot of those key metrics that we identified earlier with the help of the teams. And so what you can see right away is a bunch of KPI cards. That's what we have over here on the left and up in the top right. These are sort of constructed out of lots of smaller pieces, sort of grouped together to give you this really nice visual. So you've got the actual measure itself, you've got a comparison percentage-wise year over year, another text that's color-coded based on was it up or was it down? And then we also have a sparkline visual underneath it just to show last 12 months what's been going on. So the really nice thing about this dashboard is you can come in and in a very quick way, take a look at all these metrics at a very high level and see where you're at. And so we kind of identified for the C-level employees that this is something they really would love to have. So that's why we put this dashboard together. Went through a few iterations, and I'm going to show you some of the really unique qualities about this dashboard. And later on, we'll even go deeper into that. But for now, we're going to stay here. I just want to show you guys a couple of really neat features on this dashboard. So right now, the default page, you land on a view here that's taking a look at your top clients. I can come over here and click and take a look at my top projects. So all this information just changed. Same with project managers, see who my top managers are. And the other thing I can do on any of these is I can click on them, and let's say I want to look at this client, Baltimore Orioles. If I click on it, I'm going to get some more details about that client. So in this case, it's going to pull up all my projects related to that client. So you can see I got 3 over here. And I don't know if you noticed, all the KPI cards changed as well. So these KPI cards are filtered down by whatever I just clicked on. So super visual, super interactive. That's really what these Power BI dashboards get you. And definitely something I wanted to sort of show you guys. It was really hard our last webinar to demo that with just screenshots. So I'm really happy to be demoing a live dashboard to you guys. Again, I'm going to unclick, and now we're going to go back to sort of the high level, the whole company. This is another view that we baked into these KPI cards, is I can toggle them. So if I click on this KPI card, it's going to highlight. You can see the checkbox. And then all the details over here just updated to take a look at net revenue backlog and days. The same metric we were looking over here at a high level, we're now getting some details. And again, I can drill down a little bit, click on a client to expand that out, look at the project. I could look at the project manager who's assigned to that. Super interactive. Same with these other cards. I can click on them and take a look at my net revenue FTE. So this whole panel just changed. So as you can see, there's just a lot of nice details that are just one click away. And a little bit later, I'm going to show you some more interactiveness. We just kind of wanted to stay real high right now, but I'm going to show you some really cool features later on in the presentation. I think we got
Tom,
yep.
With all of this information, we're able to just really quickly drill into it. And if we jumped over to that project manager tab, you'd be able to see by project manager how they were performing in those projects. Am I understanding that right?
Yes. Yeah, we could take a look. We could also take a look at the project details over here. We wanted to. So here's a look at all the projects. But right now I'm sort of staying at the high level, and I actually want to demo some of that drill through capabilities a little bit later. I think we're onto a poll question, aren't we?
We are. So Kaylee, we're ready for polling question number 2.
All righty, I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll here. So the question is, do you feel that the financial information is relevant and timely enough to make confident decisions? So your options here are yes, our data is managed to a fine science. Your second is it depends on what we're trying to answer. And the third one, no, we are pulling reports that are immediately out of date. So just as the last poll, I'll keep this open till about 85% participation, or if a minute elapses here. It looks like everybody is wide awake and with us. 82% have already voted. All righty, gonna go ahead and close and share the results. So it looks like 4% say yes, our data is managed to a fine science. 87% say, well, it depends on what we're trying to answer, and 9% say no, they're pulling reports that are immediately out of date.
Right.
Okay.
So Tom, what do you make with that data? That it depends on what they're trying to pull. How can we help those that are in that 87% range and that 9% range to really make giving what they're looking for quickly and easy? What are some things we can highlight here in our webinar?
Yeah, so we see this a lot. A lot of the Deltek clients sort of just use the out-of-the-box reports, which is fine. I don't think anyone really is suggesting replace those reports with Power BI. I think most of the clients we see are looking to just enhance the reports they already have and take a spin on that data that they haven't been able to look at it the way you can in a Power BI dashboard. So I see it as a great complement to the sort of reports you already have. So once the infrastructure is set up, there is very little to do for the end user except to go to the dashboards and click around, really. Once the plumbing and the sort of the underlying architecture is in place to update, say, nightly, all this data would refresh, and from an end user standpoint, super easy to use.
So I know, Tom, you've put together some examples of how you can just come in here and you can click around, and you've mentioned drilling through the data and drilling through to seeing that finite items. Can you walk us through what you've put together for us today?
Yep. Yeah, so this is the part of the webinar I'm really excited about, because it's going to really show you guys where Power BI shines. So let's say I'm in here and I'm interested in this WIP turnover. Let's just say. So I'm going to click on this card, and we're going to go take a more detailed look at the WIP turnover. What's going to happen on this card, unlike these other ones, is I'm actually going to jump to a more detailed report. So here we are at a high level looking at WIP turnover. I click on it, it's going to drill through to another report that has to load here. There we go. And now I'm looking at the same WIP details we were looking at before at a high level, only more detailed. And so now we've got breakouts by client, my total WIP, the various date buckets, some visuals, all that stuff. And then this is really where it's very cool, is I can come in here and let's say I want to look at this Baltimore Orioles WIP, and it's 13,750. The other thing I can do here, I could drill down. That's a sort of a term that Power BI uses. So drill down is I'm kind of staying on the same report, just drilling down a level. So in this case, I'm going from a client to a project. But let's say, all right, that's pretty cool. I want more. I want some more info. The other thing you can do here is you can do what's called drill through. And so right now I'm going to go take a look at the time details that made up that WIP. And so I'm drilling through on that client and that project. And now I'm on a time details report filtered down by those that criteria. And I'm looking at transactions that made up that 13,750. So, you know, very, very interactive in terms, I've sort of chained, in this case, 3 reports together, each time going down a level and looking at more detail. That's really the power of what Power BI can get you. And a lot of reporting tools don't do this very well. They would require you to copy paste this project, go to another report, filter on it. This is all super interactive. And so you get the, you know, that effect of give me more, you know, and that's not all. I kind of feel like an infomercial when I go down these chains. So that's one of the things I definitely wanted to show you guys today. Another way you could kind of look at this is I'm going to go back to the financial dashboard. Okay. And I am going to go again, I'm going to take a look at our one client, the Baltimore Orioles. And I'm going to drill through and I'm going to go to their project details. Again, this is another report that I can drill through to. So I jump to the project details filtered by Baltimore Orioles. And again, from this report, I can even do the same thing. I can say, okay, that's cool. I want to drill through to the WIP details on that project. So boom, going to jump to another report, filter it down by Baltimore Orioles, that project. There we go. Same time buckets we had before. And again, drill through again to look at the time details. So you can see sort of the progression there of actually, in this case, I've actually chained 4 reports in a row, each time digging more and more into the details about what made up that client project or WIP. So super interactive, something a lot of tools and reporting tools don't handle very well, but Power BI, once the framework under the covers is put into place, this can do this. Out of the box, it doesn't do this. I'm gonna let you guys know, but you have to sort of set the connectors and the joins. Like, you know, this report has drill through and what keys it drills through on. That's the kind of info that needs to get set up to make this happen. But definitely worth showing you guys and something worth taking a look at. I don't know, Jenny, if you got any comments on that. I think from an accounting background, you might find that pretty useful.
So I just want to kind of go back to what you had mentioned, because you did cover so much detail. So starting back at this financial dashboard, you've shown us a gross revenue by client. So taking it back to those people who are on the phone, especially that I think 9% who said, you know, we're pulling reports and they're immediately out of date. In this instance, that screen that you're looking at right there, that's just pulling either a project earnings or an office earnings by client. And then if we immediately go over to in that top header where it says clients, projects, and project manager, you can quickly see how each of those is performing. So we've now taken the project earnings report or the office earnings, and we've dumped it on its head and immediately just transform the data in one click of a button. With respect to the WIP report and the drill through functionality, you've been able to really highlight something in a very high level piece of taking two reports that are in Vision and Vantagepoint. And that's the unbilled summary and the unbilled detail. And you can quickly just jump in at a given notice. And so, Tom, we're waiting for timesheets to be posted. We might be waiting for other AP items. So as soon as the database refreshes, people can come in the next morning and look at this data, correct?
Yes. Yeah, a lot of clients schedule the refreshes at night. So in the morning, everything's updated. You can manage that schedule to be every 6 hours or whatever you guys need. And I mean, to be honest with you, there is an option to be sort of more real time. It's just not necessary for most clients. Most clients seem to be fine with the schedule running overnight and updating. So there's various options there on how often you want this data refreshed.
And that's part of the things that you discussed in that kickoff meeting with a client before we even go down and start this development process, correct?
Right. There's some planning that goes into each of these dashboards and even how they're going to sort of function within an environment. And even though all our clients tend to be Deltek clients, some of them aren't. It seems like every client has a little something different. So some of that you have to work out how often you update the schedule with the environment it's running in, things like that. And we'll go over a little bit of that in a little bit.
All right. And just, for people to think about, if you have this data at your fingertips and you're able to quickly digest and consume this, think of what those questions can be, especially in the market that we're in today with most AE firms talking about mergers, acquisitions. Heaven forbid we go through what we just came out of, another pandemic, where we have to quickly make decisions, and not having that data at real time forces you to be behind that proverbial 8 ball before it's needed. So, Tom, thank you so much for showing us those pieces. And I'm going to go ahead and take it over and talk about some of our success stories. All right, everyone should be seeing our title slide covering some of our success stories. Today we've highlighted 4, and we're going to talk about the productivity analysis report, our revenue by location, a year-over-year revenue, and this is one of those reports that we highlighted during our last webinar, and then a project manager spend report. So we tried to get feedback from various financial consumers of their Power BI and how using these reports was successful for them. So our first one is our productivity analysis. This feedback that we got came from an employee manager of a 150-person professional services firm. And what they came to tell us was that as a manager of a large team, they're able to quickly see how their team is performing this year against prior years and where they're trending. They also were able to quickly see that if their team was 65% utilized, they would be profitable. So knowing that their team was trending at 62% meant that they may need to go ahead and do a little more work to ensure that their group was profitable. Tom, any feedback on this, on any input that you wanted to share with this one?
I've worked a little bit on this report. I know the budgeting and like the target goal is something that sometimes a client will define that outside of the vision system. So that might even be put in like a smart sheet or something. So that, again, that's one of the beauties of Power BI is you can pull in lots of disparate data sources and combine them into a dashboard like this.
Again, just highlighting that flexibility that we have with the system. So this next screenshot is based off of a design firm, 350-person design firm, and it came from a COO who is able to use this tree map. Some refer to it, especially those of us who've been using the Deltek products for a minute, we refer to it as a heat map, but in Power BI technology, it is referred to as a tree map to show how their studios are performing. So in here, we've got revenue, we have expenses plus labor, and we also have overall profit. And so they have 5 different studios. They're kind of spread across the US. Got some in Manhattan, some out here on the West Coast in San Francisco and Seattle, some in the South, in Miami. So you're really able to see how each studio is performing, and none of the information is the same. Now, this may look familiar because in our last webinar, we showed it as a pie chart, and talking with this client, they wanted it shown a little bit differently. So we went out and we looked at some of the metrics that were in Power BI, and that's where we ended up with this one. Okay. So this year-over-year analysis, this came from an actual CEO, and he was able to use this report to see where they were performing before the end of the month. And it helped him to reduce the amount of unknown of what's that bottom line number going to be. Making this report work took a little bit of configuration of their system and vision, and the fact that they had to enable revenue generation so that it was processing automatically on a nightly basis. So they worked with the functional team to get that set up in order to go ahead and leverage vision and the data coming out with Power BI. Our final success story that we had here is another example of a heat map. And what this one provides is for project managers. So this came from a 1,200-person healthcare firm. It's by project manager. As we can see in this, you can see that we've got the collapse function enabled. So underneath of this, going back to what Tom showed us in our earlier slides, you have the ability to have something like this with a lot of information on it, and then expand it to see that lower level of projects. So from the project manager, they felt that this gave them a great way to visually see and hone in where there were issues without having to consume a lot of text. So really quickly, visually hone in to those project managers who are trending red for the majority of the year. And then, you know, is there an uphill swing? Is it a specific project? And have those conversations, again, before the project is completely out of budget and gone off the rails.
Yeah, that's a really great example of using the sort of the thresholds and coloring that you can do in Power BI. The other thing I will mention is even when you sort of can't find out of the box the visuals in Power BI to sort of get what you want visually, you can either customize what they have, or they have a whole app store with like over 400 visuals that you can download and use for whatever you want. It could be Gantt charts, it could be a project scheduler, visual, things like that. So that's another great thing about Power BI is whatever the client comes to you with a problem, there's usually like 5 different ways to look at it, and you can find something that's going to work.
And then we can slice and dice this anyway, correct, Tom? If we wanted to take a dashboard that had a little bit of heat map, a little bit of bar charts, some graphical, some text data, we can help a client achieve their overall design.
Yep. Yeah. So, report like this would often have either some filters at the top or hidden in a dashboard that you could pop open, focus in on a specific year. Like this one looks like it's mostly 2020. Let's say I want to go look at 2021. You could just toggle that. So lots of customization that can be done on all these reports.
And Tom, I know a common one that we have with a lot of our clients is really security and being able to prevent people from seeing maybe other members of their team or other team members. We have that same security within Power BI, correct? So if we built a dashboard that we wanted upper management to see, but we needed those project managers to specifically see what is theirs, we have that capability.
Yep. Yeah, on the Microsoft Power BI website, there is sort of roles and group settings to assign people. So something like you could assign it at a level where only certain groups or people could see a report. They also have a lower level security called row level security, which is I go into a report and I only see my data. So I can see the report, but it's filtered down by my data. We use that one a lot. If you think of like an employee dashboard or report, we only want a specific employee to see his own data. That's where we would use the row level security in Power BI.
Okay. All right. So with that, I think we're on to our next polling question. Kaylee, over to you.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll, and then I'm going to read through the answers just because we had a character maximum in there. So your question is, how comfortable are you with starting the process to utilize Power BI? Your first option is we've done it and feel comfortable doing it again. Your second option is we've had a basic understanding but are looking for best practices. And 3, we have the right people in the room but need help directing the process. So with the other 2, same thing. I'll keep this open either 60 seconds or if we have about 85% of the crowd voted. And it looks like 75 have already voted, so everybody's sticking with us this afternoon, so that's all good. And just a reminder, if you're looking for that 1 CPE after this webinar, to cast your vote here. All righty, gonna go ahead and close and share the poll results. And the first one is 12%. We've done it and feel comfortable doing it again. 52% say they have a basic understanding but are looking for the best practice. And the third one is we have the right people in the room but need help directing the process. So those are your answers.
All right, thank you so much, Kaylee, for that. We're going to go ahead and with that, it kind of springboards us into our next topic. And that next topic is, how do we connect it all? We've shown you some amazing tools. We've heard from people on how they're able to use it. We've walked through how we've taken multiple reports in just one setting, and whether it came from Vision, came from an Excel sheet, came from an Access database, and connected it all into one dashboard. But we didn't just turn on Power BI and get there. We had to have some overall planning. So with that, Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Yeah, there's certainly some planning involved to make using Power BI a lot easier to use. I think part of it depends on where your organization wants to go with it. As far as best practices, I come from a development background, doing a lot of coding, and in a way, if someone was to ask me best practices, I would treat it a lot like that environment. So if we flip to our next slide, which starts to get into a little bit of like the architecture, an overall plan. So this is an overall on-premises architecture that we actually have internally at Stanbaugh Nest. So what you'll see here is some little blips about Power BI Desktop, which is the free tool you use to create your reports. You have the Power BI web service, which is the portal that you publish those reports to once you're done developing them. And then you got various connectors. I can show that same info on the mobile app. And then on the left-hand side, we get into data sources. So this is, I want to pull in a spreadsheet, a flat file, a database, and how do I do all that? So there is some setup. In particular, I think one of the things that's been tripping up a lot of clients is because Power BI online, the dashboards and reports live online, that those reports need access to your data to refresh. You could certainly create them locally, upload them to the portal, and they would still have the data that you uploaded them with. But that if you didn't connect the gateway properly so they can refresh, they can never refresh their data. And most clients, that's not what they want. So this is a typical architecture where you're capable of refreshing that data. You'd set up a Power BI gateway. The gateway is sort of a handshake, a bridge between Microsoft Power BI's website and your internal databases or data sources, could even be files. And so that's what's really going on in this data gateway area. Along the lines of like best practices, this is sort of a default architecture, but a lot of companies' best practice would be to never develop against your production database, even though you can do that. It would be more preferable to sort of have a dev environment or a dev database, which is sort of a copy of your production database. So if you think of a Deltek Vision, the data lives in a database, you'd make a copy of that, put it in on another server, and you'd write your reports against the copy so you're not impacting production. That's pretty common. I'm trying to think of some other sort of best practices. I know, from the gateway standpoint, some clients have to have 24/7 redundancy. So if that gateway server goes down, they have a second gateway that can master slave and take over. That's another setup you could put in here. It just kind of depends on how advanced you want to build out that environment in terms of best practices. I do know the gateway is pretty important too, because we've experienced this. You could just install that gateway on an existing server, but we've seen some contention problems when we've done that. It works way better as a dedicated, just really small virtual machine that's dedicated just as a gateway, and it's been flawless. So that's been a definite recommendation to clients, even though you don't have to. So just trying to think of some recommendations there. But definitely it's sort of something you treat as almost a development environment so that people aren't impacting production. The other thing we've seen is some clients are super heavy on the reporting, if they're updating all the time, rewriting the reports, publishing them, in that case, it might actually even make sense to create a data warehouse, which is a separate database extracting just the data the reports need. And again, so those reports don't impact the production database. That's another best practice you could put in place. I know on the next slide, it's a little, I added this because I realized some clients are not on-prem. They're online. So I did add this little highlighted blip that this is down in the Power BI gateway. This is where you would set up an ODBC connection using your Flex Cloud license. So for Deltek online users, this is where you would need a special license to get access to that data. So I definitely wanted to highlight that. And just so you guys know, at the end of the presentation, we put together a couple white papers to help sort of walk you through whether you're an on-prem client or an online client of Deltek, how to get access to that data. So that's coming up at the end. So
thanks, Tom. That's a lot of information for everyone to keep in mind.
Yeah. So next screen is talking a little bit. This is inside Power BI Desktop, which again is the tool where you create the reports. But before you create the reports, you've got to create some data sources. You got to bring that data in. And so you'll go in, you'll set up a new source. It could be any one of these categories on the right-hand side, a file, a database, an online database, and or other. Other is more like third-party tools. So if you think of like, I want to pull in my QuickBooks data, they'll have a connector, a native connector that you can use in Power BI to pull that data in. And once it's in, that's where you get into the query editor. That's what Power BI calls it. This is an area where you can take a look at your data. You can change data types. You can clean it up a bit. Like I've got null or blank values. I don't want that pulling into my report. You can pull that out of here. So this is pretty critical area as far as massaging the data that you would then use in your reports. But I mean, the net result of this is that's the data that will feed into the reports and the visuals that you see. I could spend a whole day just talking about this query editor. So but I definitely wanted to point it out. This is kind of where you got to start to pull that data in. Some of the stuff is a little technical. It's connections to databases and you need permissions to do that. The other thing that's kind of important is you don't necessarily want to point to your Deltek database and bring everything in. You kind of want to whittle it down to just the data you need for that report or set of reports. So this is where you would get started doing that. If you're not good at databases or SQL, you might need some help setting this up. But once the data is in there, creating the reports is pretty easy. It's a lot of drag and drop, all kinds of visuals. So that's the part that some people stumble on is just getting started. So, and of course, once the data is in there, that'll help you drag and drop gross revenue columns, gross profit, because that data has been sort of rolled up to that status, and then you can pull it in. So that's what we're showing here on this screen.
And so, Tom, in those train the trainer meetings that you have, I know sometimes we're looking just for Power BI consulting to help those employees, help those system administrators know how to do this. This is where you're really walking through those best practices, showing them how to use the query editor, the filters, functionality, connection, and that's where they're working with you or Eric to do that level of functionality, correct?
Right. Yeah, my analogy often is let's say you're going to make spaghetti for dinner. You don't go and say, give me the whole store. You go there with a pick list of things that you're going to make spaghetti. That's really where you might need some help defining the tables and or the queries that can pinpoint the data that you want to pull in the report or make spaghetti.
Okay. All right, so tying it all back to how do we begin? What do we need in that slide of bringing in the reports that you're going to use, the data that you want to see, so that when you're thinking of the query editor, we're really linking those pieces together.
Right, so that's the next slide. Next slide gets into the area they call data modeling, which is really joining the data sources together so they can communicate with each other. And so what you're seeing on the screen here on the left is a design pattern they call star schema. That's preferred by Power BI because it's super efficient, super fast. The Deltek databases are what they call relational databases. They don't quite look like this. You can work with relational databases. It's just they won't perform as well as a star schema. And again, you definitely want to spend some time whittling down what tables and what fields you need for a particular set of reports. Otherwise, you're just bringing in way too much stuff. And so that's sort of where you would do the management of the joining of the tables together. This would be something like I bring in my project table, and on the project table is a project manager ID, but I want to see their name. I don't want to see their ID. Well, there's an employee ID table. You can join by IDs and it will pull in their names. That's sort of what's going on here. That's how the data joins together. So that's what they call the data modeler area.
Okay. And Tom, I just want to, for the audience purpose, you really start with that query editor and then you end with the data modeler. You don't start with data modeling and then go to query editing, correct?
Right. So you'll start pulling in your data sources in the query editor. It will, a lot of times it will take a guess at what those joins are for you. Sometimes it's accurate. I'd say maybe 80% of the time it's accurate. And other times it's way off. So you got to go in and fix the joins or add the joins because they didn't get added for you.
Okay. Right. Well, you talked earlier about our white paper.
Yep.
And it looks like we've added it here. So can you tell us a little bit about the difference between the two, just high level?
Yep. So high level, we've got a couple white papers. They basically are, if you're an on-prem client, that's the one on the left. So this is connecting to your on-prem SQL Server database, Deltek SQL Server database. So we'll walk you through in the white paper how to do that. And then the one on the right is the online version, which needs FlexCloud to do an ODBC connection to the online database. And that's what that walks through.
So anyone should be able to access one of these, and as long as you have the security access and basic understanding of that database, use these white papers to walk through those connections.
Yeah, it's probably more of an admin role, someone who's pretty technical to set that environment up for your organization. But once it's in place, the report builders just use it. That's kind of how it works.
Okay. All right. So we're going to open it up for some questions here.
All righty, I'm going to go ahead and open up the questions panel here so I can read through a few for you. There is a lot of them, so if we don't get to your question today, Jennifer or Tom will reach out to answer those. So the first question I'm seeing is, what if I am not good at SQL? Can I still use Power BI?
So great question. You can. you could be dangerous. I will say that. So, but where we were talking earlier about the query editor, that's where you would you'd make your connections to your SQL Server database and or write your queries. So if you don't know SQL, I would suggest you get some help there getting those set up, so you don't pull in everything. You can point it to tables and it'll pull in the whole table, and sometimes that's okay. But you also have to know what you're doing. If you accidentally point your data source to prod and put in a bad query, yeah, it could be bad. So you can, but I would say you probably want to get a little help, at least getting those connections set up. And then once they're set up, you sort of just use those connections. You don't manipulate them. That's what I would suggest.
All righty. So there are a few questions coming in here about the white papers, and I'll go ahead and answer those. There are questions about, will we be posting the white papers? I just wanted to point out that on our survey, there's going to be a special question to ask if you are in the cloud or on-prem. So we just ask that you answer in the survey, so then we can personally send them to you to get you set up with those. But if you do miss that survey, they will be available for download on our website as well. So the next question is, did you use Vision or Vantagepoint for this presentation?
So we actually used both. We used Vision and Vantagepoint and are able to pull from both of those tables to for the reports. There were some of the client success stories that were actually using Vantagepoint. That studio's firm was using Vantagepoint for that metric.
Alrighty. Is the cost for Power BI based on number of employees or users?
That depends on the tier you're in. Most people will do the, I think it's the Pro license. It's the middle tier. That's sort of a flat fee per client. I think it's $10. Sorry, not per client, per person. $10 a person. And that really involves anyone who would need to see or share reports in your organization. They would need that license. There is a version of Microsoft 365 that comes for free. Off the top of my head, I can't remember which version it is, but that's something to take a look at. And then there's a premier version, which is, it's expensive in terms of a monthly fee, but then I think it's unlimited in terms of users. So I think most clients that we cater to will use that middle tier. That's what we use. We're around a 200 employee organization. So, and that works really great for us. So that's sort of the price points.
Alrighty, looks like we may have time for one more question. So this came during, Tom, when you were doing your first part of the demo, when you were drilling down with the project manager. Can you drill down by employee and see how they are performing?
Interesting. On that one currently, no, but you could add an employee details page and then drill down. Right now, since it's at project manager, that would be sort of your link. So like we would have a employee details page with maybe a manager drop down. As long as we can make that link, like the manager drill down to the employee, we can do that. But right now it's not set up that way.
Alrighty, so it's something that you can just ever build on, basically.
Yep.
Alrighty, so it looks like it's 2:59. So with that, I will pass it over to Jennifer and Tom to go ahead and close us out on the hour. Just a reminder, fill out that important survey for us, because we do look at those results and use that to answer any questions as well.
Right. So we would like to thank everyone for your time today, partnering with us to go through this experience, understanding how Power BI can help provide you that financial metrics at your fingertips. And, have a wonderful day. Tom, is there anything you'd like to add?
Nope. Thanks for letting me be here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.